for a few minutes and then we'll get started with your presentation, Malcolm. But I
Sure.
just want to welcome everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to our first webinar in the new UH Alumni Getting the Job series. Just so everyone knows, I'm Laura Wood. I'm an Associate Director of Alumni Relations with UH. We've had a great response to this webinar. I'm so happy to see so many of you tuning in. So this is part of a two-part series. So hosted by the Office of Alumni Relations, we have two webinars showcasing UH alumni experts in hiring and human resources. We'll focus today on crafting an impressionable resume and a cover letter, and preparing for the job interview will be our next webinar on July 30th, and I can talk a little bit about that at the end. So many of the initiatives that we produce from our office have the intent of spotlighting members of our alumni community, their stories, their expertise, their accomplishments, and this series is no exception. We're so fortunate to have leading experts in HR as part of our UH alumni community, and we'll be hearing from one today. So a little bit of virtual housekeeping. This session is being recorded and should be made available to you afterwards. We'll have the Q&A function open during this webinar, so if you have a question for the speaker, please drop it in the Q&A function below. For those of you who submitted questions during the time of registration, we've read those, and we'll do our best to answer everything by the end of the webinar. So I'd like to introduce our speaker today. So Malcolm Inamine, thank you so much for being here. He's the VP and Chief Operations Officer for Hawaii Food Bank. He's been with them since November 2016, and in the last 4 years, he served as the Chief Administrative Officer and Interim President. He has over 25 years of human resources experience and over 20 years of executive and leadership experience here in Hawaii. He's taught courses at HBU, at University of Phoenix, our Leeward Community College campus, and the Financial Educational Alliance of Hawaii. He has also written resumes professionally since 2006 for a company that he created himself, Way to Learn LLC. And lastly, in 2008, he was recognized by Pacific Business News as one of the first HR professionals for 40 under 40, which is quite the accomplishment. And most importantly, he graduated from UH with an undergraduate degree in management and human resources management, along with a minor in ethnic studies, and a graduate degree from the Scheidler Executive MBA program. So that's enough talking for me, Malcolm. I'd love to bring you in to say hello to everyone and to get started. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you tuning in and taking this opportunity to learn a little bit more about a resume and your documents. So please feel free to ask questions. I want to make this a great learning experience for everyone. I have been writing resumes professionally for a little over 14 years, normally for upper level. So I've done a bunch of different ones. At Leeward Community College, I was in charge of the professional employment program. So I had to take students to a career search, resume writing, and a mock interview. So I'm seasoned and I'm experienced in writing documents, and I'm going to try to give you some insight tips and show you the best way to present yourself as you go through your branding process and submitting your documents. Okay, so Laura, we're gonna start the slideshow.
That sounds good. I'm gonna turn off my video so that everyone can focus on you, the star of the show.
Okay, great. Yeah,
Thank you. Yep.
Okay, so here we go. I'm gonna start sharing the screen. So crafting the perfect resume and cover letter. So everyone, you guys know who this person is. The reason why I put him in is not to make a political statement, but everybody knows who he is. Barack Obama was from Hawaii, and for most of us, the entire world is not going to know who we are. So we're going to have to really present ourselves and put together a marketing tool or a branding tool that's going to allow us to get recognized. And this starts off with the resume. For most of you, some simple advice is to start a career portfolio. So in this career portfolio, you want to keep all your evaluations, your job descriptions, your compensation adjustments, your awards, your certificates. Keep it all together. Also, make sure you scan it in. So in the event that it gets lost or misplaced, you have an e-file and you have a soft copy file for it. And this is so important because keeping the job descriptions is going to make it a lot easier when you write your document, especially with the job functions or the essential functions. It'll really allow you to look at the position description that's being posted, and then find similar skill sets that or experiences that you have and be able to tie that in. So hopefully that makes sense. Also, by keeping your evaluations, you're going to have the name um, um, for references of your former supervisors, managers, or possibly executives. So it's really important that you create this and you use it as a reference going forward as you start your career or as you continue your career. So it's very important. In the letterhead, we're looking at, first off, for the cover letter, you want it to be short, sweet, and concise. You don't want to regurgitate everything that's on your resume. You kind of want to put some highlights in. So this is the typical format, and most people, they don't follow the format. They just write a date and the name or whatever. They leave out a lot of the important information. So this specific format gives you a detailed approach to how you want to construct your document by, with the letterhead, putting your name, address, phone number, email, as well as possibly your LinkedIn URL if it is complete and it's, up to date. Putting in the date, the inside address, recipient's name, title, organization, and address, salutation, put a colon after the person's name. So the opening paragraph basically telling them that possible name of a referral or the position that you want or desired. Paragraph 2 and 3 is basically your sales pitch. You can put in a third paragraph depending how long you want to make it and how qualified you are for the position. You want to include some possible experiences. So I do have a example that I will share, and it's one that one of the from a employee that applied for a position in Colorado. So this is pretty good. So looking at the format, this is something how you want to construct it, making sure it's on, making sure it's formatted correctly, going down and addressing everything. So when you're going through all of this and looking at it, it says, she was able to already start a tie-in to the director by saying that, she's researching different marketing firms, discovered network communications, and it based on her experience, she was excited because, she's working at a credit union now and able to pass that experience over to her position that she's applying for. And, she then references her experiences, giving some support to the document and, stating her position about how she's motivated to help the organization. She puts a nice little closing by saying, hey, during my credit union experience, I have strived to develop and maintain high standards of professionalism. And she closes by assuring that they would demonstrate the same level of dedication should it be allowed to join, network or should be network communication team. So, and she closes everything. I changed out the names and some of the addresses and everything else, but typical cover letter, you want to make it short, sweet, concise, but making it a very strong and compelling pitch to make you a good and qualified candidate. Okay. Talking about different kind of, moving over to the resumes now. There was a question up front asking about the different types of resumes, and there is several different types. There is basically 5 types of resumes. There is the chronological, which is the most popular, which lists the most recent positions and experience to the past ones. There's a functional. Functional resumes are good because it highlights your abilities, summarize your work history, but it's usually at the bottom. The functional resume is used for people who have gaps in their work history, are re-entering the workforce, have frequently changed jobs, are looking to transition into a new career, or don't exactly fit the model of what recruiters are looking for the positions that they are applying for. The third type of resume is a combination, which is a hybrid of functional and chronological. It outlines the skills that you have possessed and relates them to the time periods of past employment. There's also a target resume, which simply means that you're not creating a generic one to send out to the masses, but you take the time to tweak and customize the document where you put specific skills and talents into the position and relate it to past experiences. And there's also the mini resume, which is rarely used in hiring settings, but many times there's a short synopsis of your working history in the form of a bio, often with some supplemental information requested. So for myself though, what I found out to be very effective and working is like kind of a hybrid of a targeted chronological resume. And this one is where it is chronological, but you kind of blend some of the skills from the posted position and blend it so that you're not plagiarizing, but blend it so it's easily identifiable that you have the skills that qualifies you for the position that you're seeking. So going through this list, identify the most appropriate resume sections. So some of you might not have awards and honors, you know, and we'll go through this as we go through the presentation. You'll see what sections should possibly included. But it also kind of, you know, for those of you young that are starting off your career, it gives you a better idea of the things you need to get involved in to make your document a lot better. You know, besides from tailoring your resume with specific words and using appropriate industry and company verbiage, anytime you write your document, you should fully research the organization, understand some of the values, what their mission statement is, vision statement, and then include behaviors that you've already demonstrated in your past positions or work experience into your resume, because it's going to then clearly show that you have similar values to the organization and makes you a better candidate. The funny thing is we have a lot of people who write resume on top of their document. So they write resume of or resume for, and this is like getting an automobile and spray painting CAR on it. Everybody knows it's a resume, and it's just like everybody knows it's a car. So you don't need to write and identify what it is, because if not, you're kind of almost insulting the intelligence of the reader. So please do not write resume anywhere on your document, because they know it is a resume already. Important items. So no single format is perfect for everyone in every job. So one of the key things to remember is do not use the Microsoft Word template. Okay, you can go online and look at all the other types, but do not use that template because it shows that you put no effort into the document. It must be short and concise, to the point. So on the average, for someone who doesn't have a whole lot of experience or positions, 1 page is sufficient. If you have a more robust work history or professional experience, then you can probably fit it on 2. If you're pushing 3, then you have to have quite a bit of other things involved, and we will get to that shortly. One of the key things to remember is to not use abbreviations, especially when you're out of state. So I had a candidate who worked for YES. We did not know what YES was, but it turns out YES, which to most of us stands for yes, it actually was Youth Eastside Services. So it was a adolescent program where they were one of the program managers. But using out-of-state, abbreviations or acronyms, we're not going to have any idea reading the document. So you want to make sure that you don't put any abbreviations or acronyms in unless you spell them out. When you're looking at the font style and size, making sure that you pick a font and a font style and size that is appropriate. When you start going below not 10 or 9 points, it becomes difficult to read. So you want to make sure that you're in about the 11, 10, 12, 11, 10 range, which it's easily read, and it doesn't make give the reader a difficult time. Also using the correct type of paper in hard copy. So we'll talk more about the paper later on and your selection process in doing that. Got technology. So the reason why we put the pussycat dolls on is because I've had an email address that says pussycat808@gmail.com. We've had some interesting addresses that say, ask like minds, or very inappropriate email addresses. Your email address should state your first name, last name, and at whatever service that you're using. The most common one these days is Gmail. That is probably preferable. When you use the older ones like Yahoo, Hotmail, or even AOL, it kind of might date you a little bit or might imply that your technology might be a little bit more limited. So if you do have one of those older email addresses, what you can easily do is have set it up so it's forwarded into a Gmail. If you don't want to lose your old email addresses, just simply talk to one of your IT friends if you can't figure it out, and have your old address forwarded into a Gmail account, and that way you're still up to date with all of your emails. Even on your phone, if you were to get contacted or they were going to set up an interview, I had a candidate who had the song, Don't You Wish Your Girlfriend Was Hot Like Me? What if I'm married and I don't want that, want that for myself? Again, making sure that you don't have any games, any jokes, or anything else on your voice recording. And if you're going to provide a home number, make sure that the people, or an alternate number, make sure that people involved are aware of your possible candidacy with the position you're applying for. What's also on your social media, your Facebook, or what are you blogging? Technology is a public domain, and so people will check into that. Make sure that you don't have a doppelganger out there, or you have someone who looks or with the same name, because it can put you in a very bad light. Most people will check social media quite heavily. So, it takes you back also to making sure that you're appropriate and professional. If you're one of those Yelp reviewers and you're constantly complaining or bashing a restaurant, they're just going to think that's your personality, and that's how you're going to be as a worker. So be very careful of what you put out into the public domain, and make sure that, it represents you well. We had an interview where the candidate said and did all the right things, went to her Facebook and saw that, she was, her profile picture was her carrying a tequila bottle, sticking middle finger, and at a party in a very different kind of condition. So those kind of things will get factored in down the road, because it is a potential liability for the organization. So making sure that you are professional in your approach, and especially, if you're going into a certain profession or skill set, or like, let's say you're going into driving, or you're going to be with Uber or Lyft, and then you have all these pictures on social media with you drinking or taking shots. That's not going to line up very well. So you want to make sure that, again, everything that's posted out into social media or technology is going to reflect on you well. So the heading for your document, you want to make sure that you are, your name is differentiated a little bit bigger. And it's one of those things where these days you don't necessarily need to include the address. You can just leave your phone and your email. Some people will go and look at your address, see where you live, see what kind of cars you drive. And you want them to hire you based on your skill set and your experience, not where you live or what kind of car you drive, or any kind of profiling or judgments that are in place ahead of time. So keeping your heading, normally I would say that your name should be probably like at least 16, 18 size font, and the rest of it can be like 12 or 11, and that should work. Making sure that you possibly include a middle initial, especially if you have a more common name. You want the initial to definitely distinguish yourself from everyone else with a similar name or similar spellings to your name. So the categories, they will vary depending on how you want to do it. So normally for the more experienced people, you'd have a summary of qualifications. If you're new to the labor force, or you're new to the position or the industry, sticking a job objective is fine. Then following up with personal experience, work history, education, training, skills, abilities. These are the kind of categories that you would want on your document. And this is the kind of, this is not the exact setup though. So with people who are recently graduated, you would want to probably put your education first. There are people who go back to school and they're a little bit later or more tenured. If your job experience is just as good or better than your education, then stick your work experience first. Education does not always have to be the first line. Maybe for a position that absolutely requires a 4-year college degree, maybe it's important to put it up front and get it out of the way immediately, so that it shows that you are qualified. Versus jobs that do not require a college education or a degree, then maybe you want to stick it at the bottom and highlight your skill sets first. So there's a lot of ways to look at it. depending on where your education and training came from, depending on what kind of experience that you have as well. Summary qualifications. So you can easily write, 12 plus years in management or 8 plus years of retail. You can talk about industry experience. You can talk about community service. You can use that as a bullet point. Normally, you'd want to make everything on purpose. So like for me, even looking at this, I would do the 12, 10, 8, 3, and then stick those 2 lines at the bottom. So you have some kind of numerical organization to your summary of qualifications. And that way lining up the years will make it a lot more easier to read as well. One of the key things to remember is to pick things that are going to easily demonstrate. Summary of qualifications is in place of a job objective. Again, this is for the more experienced and tenured candidates. This is where it gives a quick highlight and people can look to see your qualifications off the bat rather than reading through the entire document. Depending on the position, sometimes there's hundreds or thousands of documents that come in or resumes that come in. The recruiter is going to just simply weed out based on a quick scan of your qualifications and your skill sets. Job objective, if you have to write one, make it compelling. Don't make it too vanilla or too plain. A brief 1 or 2 line statement regarding the type of work you want or the position desired. And don't just say that you want to be in the management trainee program. So, you can write something to the fact that you're interested in a challenging management trainee program for a very progressive and reputable organization. You want to be a little bit more descriptive in your job objective rather than just saying that this is the position you want. When you write a job objective down, it definitely helps provide focus and relates directly to the employer's needs. So being a candidate, find verbiage or find words that are going to make it interesting and show that, gives a compelling reason as to why you want the position. Professional experience. So several different ways to do this. So you can list your companies, city, state, position, title, dates employed, brief description of duties. So if you work for a really good company that has a reputation of turning out great candidates, then maybe you want to list your company first and bold it a little bit. If it's a position based, then maybe you want to stick your position, bold your position, then write the company, city, state, dates employed, and the description. Normally the duties and responsibilities are always toward the end. You can either bullet point it or you can write it out. We have included some examples in this presentation. The other thing too is to base it on numerics or results by putting in statistical information of sales goals achieved. It could be how you increase business, could be the volume, the revenue, how you're able to reduce expenses. So significant accomplishments is another way for people to list down some of their responsibilities and some of their experience and skills in that category. So this was like for an intern, that you completed some of the basic things. If you're looking at, you can change up your document a little bit. If you had multiple jobs where there was a lot of jobs, you can just write based on relevant experience or related experience. Then that way you don't need to include every single position, especially like if you had restaurant or fast food, you don't need to include that because since space is limited on your document, you want to make sure that you put everything that you need that will qualify you for the position. Education, again, there's several ways to put it. Basically, you don't want to list your high school, but if you have your college and you did well, and college is within probably 5 to 8 years, it's okay to still list the GPA. Anything past 6, 7, 8 years, I would tend to let your work experience speak for itself. GPA is important though, because it shows that you have a standard and that you are able to uphold and excel in that kind of environment where there's an aptitude to, you have to demonstrate an aptitude to learn. With the these days getting your sorry about that. Okay, so these days getting your graduate degree is important as well. And I gave a speech or a presentation to the current value of an MBA in today's job market. One of the key things to remember is that education is definitely a vehicle for opportunity. But what it basically tells most people is that you could pay tuition, you could show up to class, and you could take tests, and you got a piece of paper, and you could, it shows you could do that. But it doesn't automatically translate into this amount of salary or guarantees you X amount of job. You have to show that you could take those concepts you learned in class and turn it into value in your daily performance. So that's super important, being able to do that, because there's a lot of people who went to college and still won't make it in the workforce. When I was working for Home Depot, we had an MBA graduate who could not pass the customer service test, and he took it 3 times. I kind of knew where he was not passing, but he couldn't figure it out. And he was basically feeling entitled that because he has an MBA that he should qualify and not have to take the test. And that's never the case. Education and training. So one of the key things too is, that's why I was saying up front, to make sure you do a career portfolio. Keep track of all your training, your seminars, your conferences that you go to, because it shows that you are constantly learning, that you're still current with the knowledge of the industry, and it's important to show that you want to get better at what you do. So going to all of these, anytime you have an opportunity to go to a conference, seminar, workshop, definitely participate, keep track of it, and make sure you scan that document to keep e-files and soft copies in case you ever lose it. Skills and abilities. So categories used to further explain additional skills that might not have been included in the work experience can be titled as license certifications. So this is like first aid, CPR, your real estate license. It could be your CDL. So there's all kind of other skill sets that might be beneficial for the job, and it's really something where it will further give depth to your document. You don't want to stick a whole lot of these. If you can include them in your work experience, it would be good. But it's, this gives you an out to include an additional category. Awards, honors, and recognition. Some of us, or some people, are normally not into that. But one of the key things to remember is that it definitely shows your commitment to excellence and to service. So whether you get on the dean's list or the top fundraiser, you can easily put those kinds of things in. It shows that you have a commitment to excellence and that you're constantly striving to be better at what you do. It definitely helps in the eyes of the recruiter, because it shows that, as an employee, performance is something that you are concerned with and that you want to execute at a very high level. If the award is something that needs clarification, try to explain or spell it out so the intent of the recognition is understood by the reader. So somebody won the Blue Vase Award, and we didn't know what the Blue Vase Award was, and it turned out it was Employee of the Year for that organization. So making sure that you explain the award and what it was based on. You want to, if you want the value of that recognition, you got to explain it so that the reader, when they look at it, they understand why it was given to you and for what purpose. So make sure that you put some kind of explanation involved if you do get an award or any kind of recognition. Memberships, activities, and interests. So memberships are in professional clubs, organizations, work-related activities, sports involvement, extracurricular activities, community service. These are all really important because employers these days want to hire a well-rounded individual. They want people who have good social skills. So, somebody once told me, well, I just coach kids soccer. It's, not a big deal. It is a big deal because it shows that you're able to gain the interest of kids. And kids are by far your hardest audience to engage with because they don't care how much money you make. They don't care what position or title you have. They don't care about your education. It's just whether you can make it fun for them and, have them produce the results or, for competition or to have to gain better skill sets or just to have fun in the game. If you coach a bunch of 5-year-olds, I mean, that's, if you can coach a bunch of 5-year-olds, it's easy to deal with adults because adults have at least some kind of comprehension. But the other part of that too is that it shows that you're able to deal with the parents. These days, for most of you involved in any kind of youth sports or activities, it's not the kids that are the problems. It's the parents as well. And the parents can be even worse than the kids. So it shows that you have good social skills or interpersonal skills in it being able to deal with conflict resolution or dealing with concerns, or it shows that you demonstrate a good problem solving capability in dealing with the parents. So really key to get involved and understand, that these kind of activities are important because they demonstrate a lot of skills that might not easily be recognizable, but then they are relevant in the workplace. Job and company alignment. So you want to make sure that you're lined up correctly. So, I tell people that if you're gonna, so a good example was a person who got their human resources degree. They were working in a restaurant. And so, I told the individual, like, do you study Chinese for the Russian test? She said, no. So I said, you need to find a job that's going to get you in administration, touching paperwork, following through on documents. That's going to help you gain skills and talents for your career. If you're getting your degree, try to line up things that are going to help you get skills. So let's just say you're going to become a nurse. Something you can do is volunteer at the hospital. Do volunteer work with the demographic that you're looking at working with. If you're going to be a pediatrician, maybe try to find something working with kids. If you're going to be, dealing with the elder care, volunteer at a senior or community care home. So those kind of things of developing skills toward your targeted career is really important. So one of the interesting ways is, let's just say you wanna go work at a particular company. Look up the CEO, find out what nonprofits or community interests he has, and then go and volunteer at those events. More than likely, they will be management team or leadership team members that are at the event. So you're already networking with some of the leadership team, and then also your sorry about that. You're also lining up with HR, because the HR normally has to recruit to get people to go to these events. If you're already volunteering, you become a much better candidate already. So be strategic in your community service. And when you start lining up your skill sets, this is an easy way to get in, and because you're doing some good for the community, but also you're vetting out a possible career path with the organization that you want. Also, find out the community service of your prospective supervisor before the interview. Then you have a common place to talk about things, or they will recognize that and ask you questions as why you're doing it or whatever else. And again, it demonstrates very similar values to the organization and to the leadership or to your potential supervisor. So the ability to relate and relate to the individual is going to be a lot easier. References. So with references, you want to make sure that you keep the same heading as these days, most people won't say available upon request. You just list it on a separate sheet. You don't need to waste space on your document saying available upon request, because they will request references anyways. So some simple guidelines to getting references, getting the approval from each reference listed, getting about 4 to 5, provide the reference with, resume, list of companies which you're applying for, and then utilize references that know you from a professional capacity, credibility, integrity, and reputation. Best references will be management or former supervisors, or people of influence, or people, reputable people in the industry. So you want to make sure you partner and you network with those people, so that when it comes time for you to apply for a position, they're going to be able to speak well, as well as being truthful about it. When you write relatives down, relatives have no credibility, as well as friends. So you want to make sure that you have people that have a professional knowledge of what you've done and the experience and talents that you bring to the table. So references continued. So this is the kind of the format that you should have. These days, you want to make it accessible as possible. So definitely include the telephone number and email address. Faxes for those that sometimes that they have, they're going to send out a questionnaire, or they want something written or whatever else. But fax is kind of going away, so it's not absolutely necessary. But you want to make the communication to your reference as accessible as possible. So using a cover letter to introduce yourself, find out the correct name of the person. Take some time. These days, a lot of things go into the effort put in. So by understanding the organization, you're able to construct your document to, again, show the values, or show that your experience and that, your character are going to line up to what the company does. Contact your, it says to contact your references, check grammar and spelling, use resume paper correctly. Okay, so this is very interesting. If you're gonna go to, an interview, normally you want to provide a hard copy unless they don't want it. But when you go out and you buy resume paper, if you buy the better quality ones, understand that it does have a watermark. Okay, that watermark should read correctly when you're holding the document in front of you. There's a lot of people who buy resume paper and then they use it either upside down or backwards, and that doesn't work. It's like buying a bicycle and then walking it the whole way. It's like, when you have, you want to make sure when you buy something, you use it correctly. So hold it up to the light, making sure that the watermark, you can see the watermark the correct way, and it's not upside down or backwards. It's super important that you use it correctly, because the recruiters will look at that and kind of use it as a gauge as far as, do you know what you're doing? So if you take the time to go out and spend money on nice paper, definitely learn how to use it. Last thing is to have someone else read and check your document, making sure that, you have another set of eyes on it, because some other times we glance over because we've looked at it so much and we've done it so much that, everything looks the same, and we don't tend to catch our own mistakes. So in Hawaii, definitely building your network, making sure that you treat everyone like a volunteer with unconditional dignity, respect, and kindness. The more you know, the more you grow. The same goes for your network and resources. In Hawaii, you have a lot of people that can open doors for you. So you want to make sure that your reputation and your brand is intact. And the reason why is because it's a small island. The network is going to be able to clue you into jobs. And for most of us, if, once you start getting a little bit more seasoned and experience, you kind of want the jobs that are not posted. You want an executive search firm to contact you to apply for a job that they think you're matched up for, or you're suited well for. So these are the kind of things where you got to get out there, network, volunteer, and get to know people, build your brand, and establish a good reputation in what you do. By doing this, you're going to have a lot more opportunities than those of us that kind of have the blinders on and just do our job. So being actively networking and participating in the community, you're able to provide more opportunities for yourself down the road. So you live on a rock in the middle of the ocean. So lucky live Hawaii, yes, it's great, but it also means that your chances of meeting other people are always good. So again, think about your brand and reputation. All it takes is one potluck or one tailgate at a UH football game. People always talk. So what you do and how you treat others, it gets around. Your skills and the talents that you have, people will know. They will call people up, calling references. Just, you heard of the coconut wireless, and people still use that quite a bit. Even when they hire for the better positions, they want to make sure they're hiring the right people, so they will call around. Providing a list of references is not helpful, because these are other people that are gonna speak well of you. They want to try and find some critics saying, what is the honest opinion of them, and do they truly have these skills and are going to help the organization? So you want to definitely network people who are experts, and then give experts a reason to coach. So, find people who are going to help guide you. Try to find mentors or coaches that you trust that will give you honest feedback. It's going to help you along your career path and allow you to progress a lot further, at a more advanced rate. I was lucky enough to have a couple mentors in my corner, and they definitely provided great guidance and great input into my career path. Okay, so that is basically it. If you have any questions, there's a chat room open. Please feel free to ask some questions, and I will be more than happy to answer it.
Hey, Malcolm, thank you so much. That was an excellent presentation, and I know I've learned a ton. And we did get a good amount of questions, and so I'd like to address as many of those as we can, if you're open to it. So I'll just kind of go through them more or less in the order that we received them.
Sure.
But wondering about if you have any advice for applying for a job that you might not have the relevant experience for. Maybe it's just an interest in completely changing the industry you're working on. If you've had any people who have come to you for advice before who are in that scenario, if you could speak to that, that would be excellent.
Okay, great. So one of the key things is I always tell people it's like, your career is kind of like buying a car. Most of the time, you're not going to buy the car unless you test drive it. So this is where when you're in school or you're getting your education, to really try to get as many internships as you can, because that way you can really see whether you like it or not. So there's a whole bunch of accountants out there who get their accounting degree, and then once they start doing the work, they find out they have to do 10 to 11 hours, just crunching numbers in a room that's air conditioned with, one out of two introverts. It's not fun. And we see a lot of accountants changing their jobs, or they're, not using their degree. And so strongly advise people to test drive your career path, because when you try to change careers later in life, you normally have a lot of financial obligations, and a career change normally means that you're going to be taking some kind of pay cut in order to get into the industry. So to make sure that you, again, are lining up your skill sets to what you really want to do. If you're transferring industries, you need to probably take a pay cut. Most people are not going to accept you unless they can see that your skill set is easily going to transfer into the other industry or position. So it's really important that you, do your homework up front. If you're in school, find out what you really want to do. Take as many internships as you can. In my undergrad, I did 3 or 4 internships, and I was lucky to get those internships. But it really gave me an idea of what I wanted to do in HR, because it's really broad. There's a lot of different categories you could touch on or do. But for people who are doing that, again, if you're going to go to a different industry, network, do community service, join the association, join the particular organization that's affiliated with that industry, network and rub elbows with the people that are already there. So then that way they can give you insight to positions offered or skills that you would possibly need to make that jump.
That's excellent. Great. Thank you for giving that advice. We did get a few questions about LinkedIn, and would love to hear your thoughts on that. Where specifically people are wondering if the way they format their LinkedIn profile should be similar to the way in which they're organizing their resume, if it should really just kind of be a copy and paste scenario, if there's different ways to use LinkedIn, and also just any insights you have into best utilizing LinkedIn if you do have a profile.
So if you do have a LinkedIn profile, make sure that you keep it updated for one. Don't let it stay stagnant, because there's a lot of people who just kind of put some things up there and they let it go. So it's still reflecting an old position. The other thing too is, one way to gain credibility on LinkedIn is to get recommendations. When you have recommendations from credible industry people, it validates a lot of your experiences and skill sets. So the only way, recommendations are hard to come by, because most of the time people don't wanna take the time to write out something that's thoughtful and that's supportive. They just would write something generic, and you don't want to post those. You want to post the recommendations that show that it validates your skill set, and you have that you're going to be an asset to the organizations. As far as formatting, LinkedIn gives you a pretty set format already. just making sure that it is accurate, and that what you post on there is truthful. A lot of people mispost things, or they want to jump on the bandwagon and get people to acknowledge a skill set that they might not really have. So when you have recommendations, it allows you to validate a lot of those skill sets, especially from credible people.
Excellent. I'll move on to a few more questions. We had a question about internships and where we can put those on our resume, if you would consider them being part of the employment section, if you think that they would be part of maybe a volunteer section, depending on if it's paid or unpaid, and how long after your internship should you be referencing that on your resume?
Okay, so for the internship, it's definitely in your work experience, because it shows that you made an attempt to get some of the skill sets and qualify you for different positions. It's good to do that because it shows you can work in the organizational structure. And it's, while it is volunteer work, it provides valuable job experience. That's what separates internship from volunteer work. Volunteer work is just something that's good for the community. Internship is a structured position in which that the company is trying to train or teach you about certain career paths. So it is very important to list it in the work experience because of the skill sets and then the things that you learn in that process. Community work is just to help everyone, but again, just be strategic in how you pick your community service. Find the organizations that gonna help fill your cup, but make it kill two birds with one stone, and make it toward an organization that you might want to work with, or people that will be there that you want to start associating with.
Great answer. Thank you. We have a few questions regarding references and who are appropriate references, because as you know, that really changes based off the job you're applying for, what kind of references you can use. For example, if someone is a recent graduate, is it appropriate to have a professor, if they're a master's graduate, to be providing a letter of reference? And on top of that, a second part is if you had a supervisor from several years ago who may no longer be working with that company and may have a different title change, or they've been transferred, can you just list them as former supervisor when they worked there?
Yep.
So two-part question, if you could answer that. Thank you.
So sure. So with recent graduates, definitely able to use instructors. That's a very good starting point. Again, making sure that if you're affiliated with any extracurricular clubs or activities or groups, maybe you can use the chair of the group, or the lead of that group as well. And for me, I like to diversify my references. You shouldn't be listing 4 or 5 teachers, probably 2 teachers, a community service person, maybe a former coach, and maybe a person in the business community that knows your skill set, other than as a student. So anytime you list references, you don't want to duplicate the same thing over and over. And again, you want to make sure that you have a blend of genders as well, because if you're a guy and you only list guys, it might insinuate that you can't get along with females very well. So having a nice blend of females, it could be a female where you only list females down. It maybe shows that you can't work with guys. So again, you want to make sure you diversify your references in all capacities, the genders, the student, the professional side, even on the community service side. That's why getting out there and doing community service is so important, because it not only helps you as an individual, it helps your professional and career progress as well.
That's great advice. Thank you. We got a couple questions, and also I'm really curious about what formats you should be sending in these materials. So sometimes I know companies will require, please send this as a Microsoft Word document, please send this as a PDF, but sometimes they don't require that. And as we know, some larger companies use scanners, right, that go through certain formats, and so certain ones work with that and certain ones don't. So if you could speak to that, and then also for maybe unconventional materials, I imagine that some companies would specify if it's an unconventional material like a video, how best to supply that. But if a company's not giving any recommendations on that, what are your thoughts on the best formats to apply with?
So certain professions have like art portfolios and things. So like maybe if an architect, they might ask you to bring some of your recent work. It could be a graphic designer. If it's a musician, they might ask you for some samples. So there's all different kind of things to support your interest in the position. If it's unorthodox, most of the time companies will ask for a specific format. Strongly recommend that you put it into a PDF. And the reason why I say that is because when you send it in Word, depending on what version of Word they have, it might jumble or change the pagination or whatever else of the document. So making sure that you send documents in PDF so it's locked in and they can't, it's not altered in the progress of the transmission. As far as, the biggest thing is to research the position and the organization and find out what little things you can do that are going to help you get the edge over the competition. So when you're saying you have your one-off documents or whatever else, find out what they truly want by researching your supervisor and getting prepared for that interview, and finding out as much as you can about what you're getting into.
Great answer. I know it's always something I've been curious about, PDF, Word, what's the best thing? So thank you for that. We did have a question that I know a lot of people might have, and that is breaking into an industry on the mainland. I know that a lot of the advice you gave is really relevant for Hawaii, and it's also very applicable to people on the mainland as well. But do you have any specific advice for folks that were born and raised in Hawaii or have been here for a long time looking to move to the mainland and break into an industry there? Do you have any kind of specific advice for that? We know that there is a big culture change oftentimes.
Yeah, so that's kind of one where, again, just being strategic in how you do things. If you're gonna be moving to the mainland, guess what? Find a national company that has its presence here. So like, let's just say an easy one is I used to work at Best Buy. So working at Best Buy, you're able to transfer to other locations on the mainland. There's the other firms, there's other law firms, engineering firms, there's business firms that have mainland business firms that have local representation. So find a company where you're able to transfer over to the mainland to get, there's like HVAC companies, and I know my friend was with Air Gas. He was in a position here, wanted to move to the mainland. He got promoted into a position into the mainland, which, lined him up perfectly for that. That way you don't lose your experience, your tenure, and your time with the organization. So again, making those good career choices now is gonna really set you up for going forward. Even if you're, maybe they don't have a presence here, but still sign up with a national company or work for a national company or intern with a, national company, because it's gonna get you the experience and basically expose you to the culture of that organization. So then you're much better prepared when you make the transition to the mainland.
Great answer. We had a couple questions about resumes and breaks in employment. If there was time that maybe you took off to start a family, and you may have touched on this a little bit already, but if you have any specific advice to how to address those gaps in employment on your resume, should you be extrapolating on it in your cover letter, talking a little bit more about that gap? Should you address it at all, or only if asked? What are your thoughts?
So on a resume, what you can do is you just title it correctly by writing relevant experience, and that way you can leave out some of the gaps. But if you were to write just work history and you don't include it, then that's giving misinformation. So by selecting the right category, you're going to be able to really showcase your skill set, even if you do have gaps. Unfortunately, most companies will have you fill out an application because resumes are not contractual. So they're not held to anything. But once you fill out the application, that's why most companies will ask you to fill it in and not use resume as attached, because the resume is not enforceable from a contract standpoint. The application is. So in the application, they will normally ask for gaps in employment, and they will ask you to explain why. But even if you are gonna take a break or whatever else, that's where staying active in the community and everything else is super important, because you can use that as your transition, saying that you're volunteering your time to this organization or helping this particular group. It serves as a good gap filler, doing community service and getting engaged.
That's great, and I agree with that. And you brought something up that I do want to touch on, especially folks from my generation are always talking about this, is when you apply for a job and you worked really hard on your resume and it looks great and you're ready to just upload it, but then they have that whole section that's more or less regurgitating your resume. And I know that a lot of companies use that because that's how they're able to look through a bunch of resumes and scan through them. But a lot of folks are like, oh, well, if I'm attaching my resume, why do I need to fill out this whole section on the job application that says the same thing? So do you recommend people say see resume for every entry that they can make, or should they really take the time to go through and input that information again?
Well, the best thing is to always follow directions. Whatever the company requests, you do it correctly, thoroughly, and do the thing, because some of them use it as a test. If you don't fill it out correctly, you're not considered a candidate. So really making sure that you read through the entire document or read through the instructions and understand all of it prior to submitting your document. Because if you submit it wrong, then you just might have nullified your whole application or your resume. So it's really important that you follow directions from the company, whatever specified. I do see a question about, is it worth hiring a professional to help with your resume? Just like with a job, you need to interview them. There's a lot of resumes who have canned templates that are just put your information to a template and then kick it out. I've seen crazy documents where somebody paid $1,000 for like a 6-page document and it was terrible. I would never submit a 6-page resume, and the person's work history didn't justify any. It was basically a 1 to 2-page document at best. But making sure you verify the validity and the credibility of your resume help is super important. There's a lot of resume services out there. They'll take credit cards. They will give you a generic document. So taking the time, if you care about your brand, then you will do your homework to make sure you match up to the right resume writer.
Great, thank you. We're approaching the noon hour, but we do have a couple minutes to do a few more questions. And if we don't get to your question, please follow up with us in email, and we'll do our best to get back to you. And maybe I'll take more of Malcolm's time later on after this webinar to make him answer some questions. So really quick, someone is curious about how to build a resume if they don't have the college degree, if they don't have college experience. And during your presentation, you mentioned maybe leaving off your high school education. But if someone hasn't received a college degree, do you recommend still putting in the high school experience?
Yes, for sure. So if you don't have any college, even if you have incomplete college, you should still list it out. So let's just say you went to college for like 2 semesters. So you can still say that you did work college, list the college, say, 2 semesters completed. You want to make sure that you don't discredit any of your education, but definitely list the high school if you don't have any college background. And most jobs, they want at least some kind of college high school diploma. So it is important to qualify that. The assumption is that if you have college, you already got your high school diploma. So that's an automatic assumption for most recruiters. But, one way to supplement only a high school degree is to go to conferences, go to workshops, go to seminars, and use that to help offset any expectations where they think that you don't have the capacity. By attending workshops, conferences, and seminars, it shows that you have the aptitude to learn, and that going to college was just shelved, or it doesn't discount you from the learning process.
Excellent. Okay, with that really great answer, I think we're going to end the Q&A portion. Like I said, if we didn't get to your question or you think of something later today, follow up with us via email. contact@uhalumni.org would be a great address to send that to. But thank you so much for joining us today. Our initial thought with this webinar series was to reach our young alumni who may be entering into the job market for the first time. But the more you and I talked, Malcolm, and now after seeing this presentation and hearing your answers to the questions, I'm reminded of how relevant your insights are to all working people. So no matter our age, our stage in our careers, it's never not the right time to refresh our skills, to understand the job application process, and to hear new voices about it. There's a lot of differing advice out there, but knowing that we're getting it, directly from an expert is is really helpful. So I want to pitch our next webinar. It's going to be on July 30th at 11 a.m. We'll be featuring Sunshine Topping. She's a Senior VP of Human Resources at Hawaii Pacific Health. Malcolm, I know you guys are pals, so you can put in a good word for her. But that'll be July 30th, 11 a.m. So if you're not already registered, please do. Your invitation to this webinar also included that one. A survey will also pop up at the conclusion of this webinar, so it'll just pop up right at the end. So please take it and give us feedback, positive or negative, anything about your experience. It helps us really keep our finger on the pulse of what people want and make sure that we're serving our alumni the best that we can. So thank you everyone for joining us. And Malcolm, thank you again so much for bringing your expertise to everyone today. We are so appreciative and I can't wait to debrief with you later. So with that, we'll say goodbye. Aloha everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.